Hello and welcome to our kitchen table. I'm sitting here with my wife, your therapist, and in a strange turn of events, your therapist told me earlier this week that she knew the topic for this week's episode, because normally it's a collaborative endeavor to determine what we're going to talk about, but no, your podcast host was informed what we're going to be talking about, which is phenomenal because it's actually a good topic. You come to the table with a list of things that you have learned as a therapist that you think would have been helpful to you when you were first starting as a therapist.
Yeah.
Helpful learnings, really, for anybody listening who's in this space, studying to become a therapist themselves, or if you're just interested in mental health and like figuring out how that dumb little muscle in between your ears works. This episode's for you.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Price, and I am currently married to your therapist.
Currently actively married to your therapist, which is me, Ash, your therapist. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about mental health and therapy, it's not the same thing as or a replacement for therapy.
I could do different variations, and when I die, I'll be buried next to your therapist.
You could. You sure could.
Let's be honest. It's more like when your therapist dies, she'll be buried next to me.
I don't like any of this. We're dying at exactly the same time.
We'll take our last breath together.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Deal. I'll shake your hand on it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Done.
Okay, agreed. Now that's settled.
Now we got that logged away. You've also informed me that you'll be making the announcements this week.
I sure have. That's because I have something very, very important to say, which is that a couple weeks ago on the podcast, we were talking about trampolines and Price got quite distracted. And that's because he came up with a plan to buy me a trampoline for my birthday. And it has been the best thing that's ever happened to me.
That plan happened live on air. You can hear that. You can hear the crickets. You asked me a question during an episode, and there were crickets on my end.
You can hear me get uncertain because I can't tell why I've lost you.
Yeah.
And you were off thinking about buying me a trampoline. And it's the best gift ever. I'm pretty sure I got a trampoline for my 10th birthday. So
Privileged.
2 decades later.
Privilege. Check your privilege.
Yeah.
Trampoline privilege.
I do. Now twice privileged with the trampoline.
And every day you jump on it multiple times a day?
Yep. If you're wondering what your therapist is doing in between sessions, that's it. I'm jumping on the trampoline.
She's bouncing.
She's bouncing on the trampoline.
Back flips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to buy it from a family that was selling it because your boy don't got it new we don't got that new trampoline money around here.
Yeah, use trampoline money.
And they had one of their children helping me pack it up. He's 8 or 9. It was very cute. He was like, "So do you got kids?" We're in the deep south. You got kids? I'm like, "No, we don't actually have kids." And he's like, "So who's this trampoline for?" My adult wife.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been the best thing. So that was the first announcement. Everybody needs to know. It's the best time ever. And it's so good for a neurodivergent brain. So it even fits along with, podcast topics.
Regulating the old nervous system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
The next announcement is that recently I've started taking on coaching clients. So as a therapist, your license is very much limited to the state in which you're licensed, which for me is North Carolina.
And for me, it's a state of disarray. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry.
So, right. I don't know if they license therapists there.
In the state of disarray?
Yeah, I don't think so.
The great state of disarray? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in North Carolina, that's where I'm licensed. And so I can see counseling clients there, but I think that there's such limited access to other neurodivergent therapists. There certainly are therapists across the country, but it can be hard to get in touch with them. And we've had people reach out from different states and want resources or want support or want to meet with somebody. And we wanted to make that possible. So coaching is different from counseling in some key ways. A lot of that has to do with being able to make an official diagnosis or write letters and that sort of thing.
Like to an employer or an apartment complex or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in general, I have all of these amazing tools that I've been building through years of being a counselor, and now I'm excited to get to share those with people in basically the same sort of setting.
It's therapy. It's the same exact service you provide your therapeutic clients or your clients through your therapy practice. It's just called coaching.
Yeah. It's not legally allowed to be the same thing.
I just mean your approach to it is effectively the same.
Exactly. But if you're wondering what to expect, the first session, you do like the same sort of consultation call.
Yeah.
The first session is getting to talk about like history stuff and getting a background. And then we'll work on support skills and
Yeah.
other elements of your life, because being neurodivergent impacts every part of your life. And so we can get into all of that stuff in the same way. It's
Yeah.
really exciting. So
if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, man, I like the way Ash talks. I like the cut of her jib. Mm-hmm. You want to get in touch and you're out of state, you're not in North Carolina, she can now offer you effectively the same services, but it is officially coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reach out to imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com
Exactly.
for more details.
Exactly. And then the other thing is something else that's needed for the community very much is support and community.
Yeah.
Being in connection with other people. I was just talking to somebody today, as I talk to people almost every day, saying, I don't know if I'm the only person like this.
Your clients are saying that. Yeah.
Feeling so alone like that. And the thing is that you're absolutely not alone, but the best way to know that is to be in community with other folks. So we're talking about starting a support group. And if you're interested in that, you can also email imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com. And we're gauging interest for
A weekly.
weekly support group.
Yeah. So, and if you're interested in either of those things, just email imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com. Tell us to go fuck ourselves. That'll make me laugh.
Fair warning, Price comes across as not sensitive to that stuff at all. I really think it hurt your feelings if people said mean things.
I can't believe I just got called out. It would tear me apart.
Yeah.
I tried to put on the strong facade, like, come at me, bro. Like, it won't even faze me. I'll be a little phased.
Yeah, so
I'm not gonna
maybe
lie.
email and say nice things.
Why do we do this podcast?
I don't know.
Why do we even fucking do
I
this?
don't know. The cats are forcing us. Thanks, Alice. Alice is sitting on the table if you're not watching right now.
Jesus H. Christ on a log. Let's get started with the...
Let's get on to the topic. So I wanted to talk about this week because something that I listened to as I was becoming a therapist was a podcast that would always end with asking a question to another active therapist saying, what do you wish you knew sooner? And this is my list of everything I wish that I knew sooner as a therapist, that either we weren't taught in school or it didn't hit me that way in school.
Right.
And it just took me a long time to pick up.
And, the important context to this list is that therapists are trained to operate within a system that is run by insurance.
Yeah.
That you are educated and trained and reinforced on every level to enter a system, a mental health system that is based on how much we can bill insurance for
Yep.
to make as much money as possible.
Which is what ties into that medical model that you are sick and need help because that's what insurance is for. Something is wrong. It should be cured. And
within a set amount of time.
as quickly
Yeah.
as possible. And while I can completely understand the draw of like, listen, therapy is expensive or it's hard to access or it's uncomfortable, how fast can this process be? It's really been to the detriment of the field that we've said, how quickly can we get people in and out of here?
Right.
And so, yeah, you have to understand that that's the context in which therapists are being educated.
Well, for the same reason that we got to use trampoline, I'm the one with the list in front of me because we have a finite number of electronic devices in this household.
Yep, they're all in use.
We have a shared document where we've put the list. So this is very much your list, but I'm going to read it, and then you're going to talk to us about it.
Okay.
Never assume... That's the second thing in the list. I read the wrong line. Fucking,
We can start wherever you want
fucking
to.
amateur hour up in here today. Here's the first question.
The first statement.
The first statement. All
We
right.
can do this.
Okay. I'm just going to count to 3 and start over. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Never ask a trick question.
Never ask a trick question. So, to me, a trick question is something where it's like patronizing, or there's an obvious like answer that you're supposed to give, or it's meant to be confusing in some way.
Okay.
So I have two different examples of this and why it's used or what happens. I think that something that can happen in a therapy situation, because there is this imbalance of power, is that, and when we talk to people about these sorts of things, there's a certain like social language that we use, which is stuff like, well, do you think it makes you a better partner to be drinking so much? And it's so shitty. And I think that it's something that we kind of hear in these spaces again and again, where like it's meant to catch you in something and make you think about it. Yeah. But instead it just makes you feel like shit, and it makes you feel ashamed, and nobody has ever bullied themselves to like feeling better.
It's kind of like when a parent asks you, it's kind of like when a parent asks you, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
That's a trick question. There's no good answer to that question.
There's no good answer. It's just made to make you feel like small and insignificant.
Do you really think it's helpful for you to drink this much during your marriage? Like, no, yeah. You got me. You got me.
And has anybody ever been helped by that sort of thing? So while I think that sometimes there are questions to ask, like, somebody, another podcast that I've listened to, they were asked by their therapist, they felt so guilty and so ashamed. And they're like, do you really think that like you're that special, that you're the worst person on the planet?
Wow.
Because they felt that way.
Yeah.
And getting to verbalize it in that way was helpful. But there wasn't an answer to that. That wasn't meant to make them feel like small and insignificant.
And it's dismissive, right? Because it's like, literally, I know that objectively I'm not the worst person on the planet.
Right.
Right. And listener, if you're ever contemplating that, you can be like, well, yeah, Price is alive. Like, I know that I'm not the worst person on the planet. But
that was a reframe. That's something called a reframe in counseling, which is that I can hear that your underlying belief is this thing, or what you're saying is this thing, but like, let's reimagine a different way to think about this. You're feeling like the worst person ever, but like, you're not. You're out of all of human history, like that's not you. You fall somewhere in the middle. Like now we can work with it.
And by asking that question, you're taking like what is a good and kind statement or observation, which is that you're not the shittiest person on the planet. And you're turning it into like a really shitty, challenging sort of, you're wrong to feel the way that you feel, and you're wrong to not feel the way that you feel. Like everything about it's now wrong. And you're wrong.
In that situation, it was a really, that was a helpful thing for that particular person.
So, which makes it an excessively bad example.
No, I was saying, okay. One, I was saying that there are ways to ask a question that doesn't have an answer. Where like when somebody's continuing to say that they're the worst person ever, getting to now, let's say that out loud. Could you really be the worst person ever? But that's not an answer that's meant to like trick. But it is a trick question when you're saying, do you really think that your drinking is helping your marriage? Nobody thinks that. Nobody wants to be drinking. Nobody wants to be caught in that. It's just meant to make you feel guilty and ashamed. Another trick question that I was asked was just a question that didn't help keep me in the moment. So we were like processing something and in the middle of talking about emotions and that sort of thing. And then the therapist asked me to name the like vagus nerve sort of state that I was in. And then when I got it wrong, because I'm in the middle of like processing and feeling this thing, she's like, are you sure that's the right answer? Ooh. And it was like, here I am having this very like emotional process. And now suddenly we've moved into like, this is a quiz that I'm supposed to be taking. And those things aren't fair. So asking questions that like aren't fair, that there's not a good answer to. And that ties into the next thing on the list, I think.
Yeah. Never assume you know the answer to a question.
So first of all, I make sure that I just am asking questions.
To clarify, like never assume you know the answer to a question. You are asking a client. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that something else that can happen is that we can learn in school when people do X, Y, and Z, it tends to be for this, this, and this reason.
Right.
Or, everybody's motivated by this belief. Or you've just sat in front of a lot of clients and feel like you start to know. But some of the best advice that I was ever given early on was like, never ask a question you think you know the answer to. And ultimately, don't assume you know the answer to a question, that you don't know what's going to happen in front of you. And coming from a place of assuming is never helpful to the client.
Well, like we saw so painfully with the therapist that you had a bad experience with. This person painted a picture of who you were and stuck to that despite evidence to the contrary. And so they would ask you questions and you would answer it honestly, and then they would challenge the question. Are you sure that that's right? Because it was contrary to the image they had created of you in their own mind.
Yes. So the big heading here is like to stay curious. I think that these are good relationship things as well. That sometimes when you're like with a partner for a long time, you might start to assume that you know the answers to things. You assume that you know why they did something or how they thought about something. And it's really important in any relationship, but especially when you're in a long-term relationship and you start to feel like you know that person.
Yeah.
Stay curious about who that person is. And that's really, really important as a therapist.
It's not an acronym, but it's in the same, I don't know the right terminology for this, but like, by golly, stay curious could be like, by gall, stay cure, or really, we could shorten it even further and just say, stay bi curious.
It's like, where is this going?
Nobody knew where it was going. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay. I worked with somebody who was a project manager at an insurance company where you're in good hands, and but I'll never say which one. And her motto for project management was only ask questions you already know the answer to. When you're meeting with people who are working on the projects that you're managing, ask questions you already know the answer to. Yeah. What she really meant was try to catch people lying to you.
Yep.
And that's what she lived for.
It was all about power and control, that she wanted to go into a meeting and put everybody in their place. And that's the other thing that happens when you ask questions you think you already know the answer to, is that you're trying to get them to say something, or to catch them in a lie. And it's so uncomfortable. It's such a control tactic.
It's a control tactic, and it's what I saw was it's excruciatingly ineffective in a workplace because you're going into this like with a combative attitude.
Yeah.
So the people who are supposed to be on your fucking team working with you on the fucking project are now like, wait, you're an adversary?
Right.
We're against each other?
Yeah.
And so people were like,
I thought you were here to help me.
Yeah. And then eventually she became like super ineffective at her job because everybody hated her. And like, heads up, like people have to like working with you for you to be effective as a project manager. Sorry, hate to say it. It's extremely inappropriate to take that mindset in a therapeutic scenario because there is already an imbalance of power.
Yeah.
As the therapist, you wield so much power that to assume that you know the answer to a question and ask those questions to like catch people or to like lead people to a certain end point is just, you're going to get bad results, and you're operating kind of in bad faith at that point, right?
Yeah. I think that a common one is asking that, like, is it helpful for you to do this thing? And I started realizing that people would say yes to that. It was kind of a question I was taught to use. Is it helpful when you like yell at your partner? Is it helpful when you do this thing? That the obvious answer, right, is that like, no, of course it's not helpful.
Right.
And people would say yes to things that I thought the right answer was to say no to, that they're supposed to, I don't know, have a realization about that. Because people are doing the thing that they think is helping. Yes, it helps me when I yell at my partner. He doesn't listen if I'm not yelling. Yes, it helps me to do this thing. It's the only way I can cope. Yes, it helps me to do that. It's the only way that I feel like And so getting to like come to every question with curiosity, with genuine curiosity. And if you catch yourself starting to think that you do know the answer to something, remember that that's an opportunity to ask, that it's not helpful for you to have made that assumption. And when you're offering up stuff to a client, you can say things like, I hear it can be common when you're dealing with that to feel isolated, or that sounds like it might feel really isolating. Does it feel that way to you? Instead of saying, yep, it is this thing when that happens.
Oh my God, that's so isolating. It's very different than that must be isolating.
Yeah. Does it feel
Yeah.
that way to you? Is that your
No,
experience?
especially when I first started therapy and I didn't know much about how it worked, she could have said, like, and the sky is red. And I'm like, yeah, it is. I don't want to be here. I'm uncomfortable. Whatever you say is correct about me. Whatever you say about my life is true,
Yeah.
Oh, you sound like a very angry person. Like, I must be. You're the expert. There's so much power there.
Yeah.
And how you, use it is super important.
And so it's really wasted time for me to tell somebody how they feel. Because they'll probably, like you said, they'll probably agree with me. And that's not helpful. Now we're on the wrong track. Now they're trying to come up with reasons to validate having agreed with me, instead of actually exploring what's going on.
Yeah. I am looking at a cornfield right now, and this is the mental image. Just buckle in and go with me here. This is the mental image that I'm coming to. Okay, sometimes out in these woods there are like deer trails. Mm-hmm. They're a little easier to walk through because game is gone back and forth there. You're trying to get to a specific destination in the middle of the cornfield, right? And only the person you're following knows how to get there. Well, if you have just wildly made little trails through it that have nothing to do with the actual destination, that person might go down those trails because they're a little easier to navigate, but it doesn't actually get you to where you're trying to go. This is a bit of a stretch, but that's what I'm thinking. If you try to pave the way for them to arrive at a certain conclusion, they might actually get to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Get to something that feels right because it feels like where their therapist was leading them, but it's not actually the spot we were meant to get to.
So to me, never ask a trick question and never assume you know the answer to a question feel very
They're very much related.
Because it's all about you as the therapist assume you know everything about the client.
Yep.
And even if you do, you deny them the opportunity to come to those conclusions themselves.
Absolutely. And that's the whole thing, is that it's empowering the person in front of you to be the expert in their own life and to be the one able to tell their own story and all of those things that are so important to us as humans.
When so often they're not even maybe telling themselves that story, right? That was my reality going into therapy, is I wasn't consciously aware of all of the things that were plaguing me. And if my therapist had just sat me down and been like, you're dealing with this, you're dealing with this, you're dealing with this, it wouldn't have been nearly as effective as me actually kind of coming to those conclusions and conquering those things myself with the helping hand of a therapist who guided me there, or encouraged me to that place, know. The third thing on your list, look for how, quote unquote, diagnosable issues are connected and help the client understand.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon for a client to start therapy and to say, I've been diagnosed with this and this and this and this, and have their CVS receipt.
I'm collecting pages in the DSM-5 like fucking Pokemon cards. Gotta catch them all.
But it's really common, and sometimes those things feel good to have a name. Sometimes it feels really shameful to come in with a whole list of things. And so keep in mind that all of those things are separate because of the way that insurance works, but that you're sitting in front of a person with a single brain and a single body, and all of those things are connected. So for instance, anxiety and depression are almost always the result of other things that are going on in their life, that they didn't magically appear on their own. They're a result of, maybe they're tied to having masked ADHD all of their life, or maybe it's tied to the environment that they grew up in.
Oh my God, can you imagine if anxiety and depression just struck at random? No, there's a reason why you're experiencing those things.
Yeah.
You don't just have those things.
Absolutely.
There's symptoms.
And even when there's a genetic component to something, I know a lot of people will talk about depression can just be genetic. There are circumstances that make that more likely to occur than not. So even if something seems to run in your family, one, there's a good chance that your family has dealt with something the same way for a long time, and you're kind of carrying that like family burden of we don't talk about stuff or we don't whatever.
Like Bruno.
Yeah, we don't talk about Bruno.
Right.
But
I love that. I love that song. I'm sorry.
but there are situations that make it more likely that even those genetic things will occur.
I think that some people find some like solace or even pride in their diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
Diagnostics.
Uh-huh.
And like, this is a podcast about therapy, and I'm not sure what that word is. Way to go. What was I saying? So they...
Sometimes people feel proud of those.
Yeah. And they take comfort in them, because it's like, oh, finally I have an understanding of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that a lot of these diagnoses were established so that therapists could accurately bill insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That is why they exist. This whole system is based on a therapist being able to bill insurance. That's not evil inherently. It's just an important, like, fundamental thing you need to understand when we talk about, like, the diagnosing of, like, mental illness or neurodivergences or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, for a little bit now, you've kind of privately theorized to me that you are suspecting that traits of bipolar disorder are very similar to traits related to ADHD. Mm-hmm. That you're so hyper and so energetic for so long that you fall into a depression because your body can't sustain that, and then when you come out of it, you come bursting out because you're full of energy now, and you come bursting out of a depression with that like manic ADHD related energy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people with bipolar have also been diagnosed with ADHD, and you and I don't think you're really trying to come out and like tell the world how they're diagnosed, like how diagnostics should work, but you are saying, I see a huge overlap between these two things, and you're less interested in like labeling them and more interested in just helping your clients like navigate a decent life for themselves.
I think the message here, especially for therapists starting out, is that it can be really intimidating to have a client come in with a long like grocery list of all the diagnoses that they have. Certainly it was for me early on. I was like, oh, somebody who is an actual professional and I'm just new, I'm just making this up as I go. They, have given this person all of these diagnoses. And sure, there can be comfort in that. It is so relieving for some people to have a name to the things that they've been dealing with. And that's great.
Totally fair.
But don't feel intimidated by that. Remember that you're dealing with a person who has one brain and one body who are deeply intertwined and connected, and that everything that happens in the one space is happening everywhere. It impacts every bit of them, and that it's so common to have co-occurring things because things are related. You're dealing with one single human.
How does that mindset kind of like tangibly play out with your client interactions?
One is that when a client comes in with a lot of shame about having a lot of diagnoses, I can help explain how things are related, that you're one person and that these things are related. So you're telling me a list of things that are going on, and I'm hearing one or two things that are interconnected. And so, like, don't worry, this isn't overwhelming to me. Like, I know where to start with this.
Yeah.
That's one way that it plays out. And when a client comes in with a long list and they feel good about that, it feels helpful to them to have all these really distinguished, different things going on. I know that I don't need to correct that.
Yeah.
I can, once again, like, get curious about what these things mean to them, where they come from. I'm sure that it's a good description of all of the symptoms that they're dealing with. And that's a great place to start. That's super helpful for me to know, okay, so you're dealing with these symptoms from this and these symptoms from this and these symptoms from this. So I just never feel like I, once again, have to come in and be the expert in somebody else's life. They're the expert in their life. And if these are the things that are happening, that's great. And it's especially freeing to not work with insurance, because otherwise in the first session I'd have to say, yep, this list of this, and this are the things that we're billing for. And getting to work with self-pay, I get to say, we can take our time with this and figure out what's going on. And if it helps you to have a name, we'll get there.
Yeah. Insurance companies demand a diagnosis.
Right away.
right away, and they won't approve specific types of treatment or specific types of medication for the different types of diagnoses. And the people who are making the decisions over those companies are not necessarily mental health professionals. This is a financial business. Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point, and it's really helped me kind of accept myself a little bit, because I have, we've talked about it a lot, I have ADHD, I have bipolar disorder, I struggle with anxiety and depression. Those are all kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
That's all kind of one bucket, one individual. His name is Price. Hi. I'm married to therapist.
Yeah, exactly. That's now a list of 4 things. That feels like a lot. But to get to go, the outcome of you having undiagnosed ADHD for so long that was uncontrollable, that starts to look a lot like the bipolar symptoms that you have. And even though, we've said for a long time in the field that these are very separate things, I'm seeing again and again and again that folks with bipolar almost always also have ADHD or end up learning that about themselves. Maybe not. I'm sure that there are exceptions to this rule. Nothing applies to everybody. But I don't think it's strange to have things related. And so for you to get to go, oh yeah, it makes sense that when I have, periods of that hyper focus with ADHD, that starts to really run into that hypomanic territory.
Yeah.
And then I always have a crash from that, and that ends up to look very depressed. And that now you have one thing. Now you have one thing that you're dealing with.
It's me.
It's you.
Surprise, motherfuckers. Next on your list, I don't have to correct everything. Parentheses, I'm not correcting things in general.
Yeah. So I think that when you're coming out of school with all of this knowledge in your brain about all of these things, it can feel really important that, clients will say a string of things that may or may not be spot on, might be a misinterpretation of something you said before. You said this thing, and so that's what I did.
Well, wait,
maybe that's not what you said at all.
Like a client coming back to you and talking to you talking to you about what you said last week or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So you and I have experienced this in different friendships of ours, where we're a support to a lot of people in our life. And sometimes people will say, yeah, I did exactly what you said. I called her up and I did X, Y, and Z. And we're like, whoa, that doesn't feel like the thing that we talked about.
None of what you just said would ever be advice I would ever give you. But you're like, I did exactly what you told me to do. That is not what I told you to do, bud.
And so... But that's a normal thing, because as we're listening to somebody else talk, we're filtering everything through our own lens, through our own beliefs about the world, our beliefs about what we ought to do. And so it's totally normal for somebody to listen to the things that we say and misunderstand that.
Isn't that crazy how lenses work? I'm looking at you through glasses right now,
Same.
and the light is bending.
Yeah.
The light is entering the lens and bending so that I can adjust for my fucked eyesight and I can see you perfectly.
Same.
And the people who we're giving advice to, we're entering we're shining the light and it enters their brain at the angle they want to see it at, and they're like, got it, I'll do it, I'll call her. I'll do it. And we're like, don't call her. And they're like, I'll call her. Sounds awesome. Sounds perfect. And then the next day, so I did what you said. I called her
Exactly. So that's really hard as a therapist.
That must be how the sun feels every day. You're not happy with what I'm doing here? This isn't a good enough fucking job for you. You got to bend the light so you can see. I'm lighting everything up. Literally bright as fucking day. Literally bright as fucking day. And you got to put on lenses. I see. Okay. Ungrateful. Ungrateful. Yeah.
It can feel scary.
I want to bounce on the trampoline.
I think maybe we should. Trampoline break.
Yeah. Let's pause. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. I think that it can be especially scary as a therapist to have people misinterpret what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because we are really intentional often with it.
I'm not a therapist. And when I hear a friend saying, I did what you told me to, and then they state exactly what we didn't tell them to do, I want to be like, no, motherfucker. I want to jump in right there. Yeah. No, motherfucker, that's not. But I'm learning. I'm taking my cues from you. I'm not saying anything now. And that's totally contrary to like my knee-jerk reaction in that situation.
This is once again just good relationship advice, that you don't have to make sure that the person that you're talking to sees exactly everything exactly the same way that you do. That it's okay to like stay on point, to stay on topic during this conversation, and to make sure that you're talking about the things that really matter. So it was really scary the first couple of times a client misunderstood something that I said, but like, was it helpful to them? Did it help them get to do the thing that they needed to do for themselves? Did it help empower them in a moment? Was it useful? And so I can kind of like move on. And also, every time, it's not my job to control the things that the people in front of me do. That's okay.
I just can't help but like, you're getting an hour out of their week.
Right.
They live in the whole week.
Yeah, it's their life.
Yeah.
It's their life. And so if they misunderstood something that I said, if they're, getting a tidbit wrong about the way that like a brain works, or the way that, whatever presents, that's okay. That we can focus on the important things. And if something else feels important, I can make a note and we can come back to it.
Correct me if this isn't the right way to summarize what you're saying. But what I'm hearing is, for the therapist listening, are you doing more good by cutting a client off while they're telling you what's up with them, while they're telling you what they did?
Yeah.
Are you doing more good by cutting them off and saying, no, that's not what I fucking said, you're fucking wrong? Or is it better to just hear them out and then gently like remind them without saying that they're wrong, without pointing out how wrong they are?
Yeah.
Gently reminding them of what you said the first time, or just reiterating that same message.
Yeah, sometimes I'm reiterating, and sometimes I'm just like curious about the next thing. Okay, so you gave her a call. How did it go? Oh, it didn't go well? Oh, no.
Oh, no. Who could have predicted?
I don't have to like, I told you so ever. And anytime I think that need to correct leads into a need to like, I told you so.
This is where like you and I are like holding hands, walking through that cornfield. And then we split. And
then we diverge.
We totally diverge. It is insane to me how little need for credit you have. A client, you'll commonly, you've told me that this happens all the time. Clients will like, look at what I did. Look, I did it all by myself. And they just like literally did whatever it was that you told them and you've been telling them to do for months. And they come to that conclusion as if they were the ones who thought of it.
But they did. They did it all by themselves.
You're talking to a guy who wants like a certificate of achievement every time he cooks a meal, every time he takes a shower. I want like confetti and fanfare and like congratulations, Bryce. Because like I think part of it was probably because growing up I was mama's special boy. I was mama's special little boy, and every time I did something, it was the best. And I think that fucked me a little bit because even at work, I'll do something. I'll like send an email and be like, "Hey, did you get that email? What'd you think about that? What'd you think about that email? It had a lot of hyperlinks in it, didn't it? Bullet points, bolded, italicized, copied the right audience on there, send it at the right time. Give me that feedback. My mama's special boy. Tell me. And
your mama's special boy, Bryce.
Thank you. No, it's just, you don't need that sort of affirmation from your clients. If I was a therapist and the client was like, look at what this thing that I have done, I'd be like, yeah, motherfucker, I've been telling you that for months. I would. There's no way I wouldn't say those exact words. I'd be a terrible therapist because you're over here like, that's amazing. Good for you. I'm so happy for you that you came to this conclusion.
It is so easy for me to tell somebody what they ought to do in a situation. It is so easy for me to say, we're not like giving advice directly, but it's so easy to say, it sounds like you need to set a boundary. Let's talk about how to set a boundary. Right. And to spend all session going through all the details of setting a boundary and what that looks like and what to say and how to do it. It is a completely fucking different thing to set a boundary with somebody who you haven't done that with.
That's before. A good point. Yeah.
And so, Yeah, if it takes 5 weeks and they keep being like, man, my roommate keeps doing X, Y, and Z, and it's like, okay, well, let's consider your options, da 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 da. And then we get to boundary setting and we talk about that a little bit again. And it takes 5 more weeks. And in 5 weeks, they're like, I set a boundary with my roommate. You did that. I can talk about it all day long. That's easy for me.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit in front of somebody and set a boundary. So yeah, I always feel that way. That's fine. The credit is all yours. And that's important. And again, important. I think that we can really get into that advice giving and how good it feels when somebody like takes our advice. But people almost never take your advice. People don't want advice.
Really? Mm-hmm. What do they want?
Well, people frequently say that they want advice. But often we want to be empowered to be able to do it. So sometimes people will want to talk through different options. Sometimes people will want support thinking through the things that they could do in a situation. Often we get locked into the thing we've always done or the things we saw our parent do. But at the end of the day, like what people need is to be empowered that like you can make good choices. You know how to do this. And
you don't need my advice. You already know the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, we had somebody in a comment, and I really validated this comment because I agreed with it. They're like, I'm sick and tired of sitting in front. I don't remember exactly how it's phrased, so my apologies. But somebody's like, I'm sick and tired of therapists who, it's such a scam. They just like say that they're helping, but really all they're doing is listening and parroting back to you.
Word. Yeah.
And like I
remember
support.
that comment because I was like, fuck, yeah, I totally know where this person's coming from.
And I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So I think people need really hands-on support. Sometimes, like I'll have clients struggling with executive dysfunction and we'll talk through the literal individual steps to do a task.
Just every time you say executive dysfunction, I just like imagine a boardroom in chaos.
Well, that in your brain, you know?
Yeah.
Or a boardroom like frozen still in time and unable to move. That you're kind of describing ADHD executive dysfunction, which I love.
It's like the SpongeBob episode where he goes in his brain and they've got like millions of filing cabinets and they're like looking for a particular file and they can't find it and everything's on fire and they're running around screaming. Yeah.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
That's executive dysfunction. Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I really do believe in getting to be direct and getting to give very direct, concrete support to somebody. But it's not a like, do this thing or else. And when they did it, they're the ones who did it.
And you're just like proud of them. You're just happy for them.
Yeah. That's totally separate from me. That has nothing to do with me at all. And how shit does it feel to tell somebody that you did something and for them to take all the credit for it? Like, that's not the time or place for that. It's arguably never the time or place for that.
I mean, today, I had a little team meeting. A few of us got on. And I was like, we had like 10 minutes left on the workday. So nobody's really trying to talk. Your boy, however, is like, so, hey, y'all, I'm not trying to like crack this can of worms, but here are the things that I'm thinking about and the sort of problems I'm trying to solve. And I listed them. And everybody was like, okay, sounds good. Have a great day, everybody. And I realized that I was like that little toddler who like dad comes home from work and I'm like, Daddy, let me show you all the things that I've done. Or like let him into the living room. It was like, first I played here with my blocks and then I came over here and I played with my train. Very exciting, Daddy. And that's, I'm a grown ass man. I did that on a work call today.
We don't ever stop needing that. We don't ever stop needing that.
Yeah, I was like, coworkers, here I played with my blocks. What did you think? Yeah. It's great. I'm like, cool. Fucking cool. Over here, I played with my train. What'd you think? They're like, yeah, that works. I'm like, sick.
I mean, it's silly because you're talking about like blocks and trains, but you were doing something that at the time was like growing your skill level and was something that like challenged you and was fun and exciting and interesting to you. And like those things are always worth talking about. And sometimes it does look more like blocks and trains. And sometimes it looks like something really complex or setting a boundary or advocating for yourself or whatever. And like all of that is worth somebody seeing you do.
Yeah. Yeah. You ready to move on?
Sure.
If they misunderstand your questions, go with it. If you still need to know / think, it would be helpful to know. Ask it next.
Yeah. Okay. So, often in conversation, we'll misunderstand one another. Beautiful example earlier in this podcast where I was talking about an example where it's fine and you were hearing it as an example where it's not fine. That happens all of the time.
I kind of lost the plot on that one a little bit. Just a little bit. And then I put it on you. I was like, that's a bad fucking example. And you weren't like, motherfucker, it is a good example. You know, you didn't give it back to me the way I gave it to you. Mm-hmm. Such as this podcast. Sorry about that. Okay.
We frequently misunderstand one another in conversation. Not just you and I, but everybody does that.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen in counseling. And
well, why the hell do you go to school for so long if you're going to be out here, like, excusing misunderstandings, you know? You're the professional, right?
I don't know.
What do they teach you at that damn school?
What's that for? And something that I've just learned over time is that the thing that they heard is usually much more useful than the thing that I thought I needed to ask. So if I ask a question and it becomes clear that the person is talking about something that was not the question that I asked, I get very curious about it. I love a misunderstanding because they heard the thing that was already on their mind or the thing that comes to mind when they're thinking about that.
It's an opportunity to learn about where they're at, right?
Yeah. Again, we're filtering everything through our perception. So they heard the question that they needed to be asked or that they were thinking about, or maybe just the question that everybody asked them and that they're tired of talking about, but they thought they needed to talk about again.
Yeah.
Something like that is happening. And either way, that's incredibly useful information. So if I still wanted to know, I can ask again. I probably need to change the way that I asked it, but I never worry about being misunderstood. I love a good misunderstanding in counseling. Roll with it.
I think, again, that goes back to the, like, you haven't painted a picture that they need to live into. Mm-hmm. If they're talking, it's an opportunity for you to learn.
Yeah.
So you're not like, no, that's not what I asked. What I asked was, like, no, you're going to sit back and just let them talk.
Yeah. And I have some clients who really worry about that, who, for whatever reason, maybe they've been misunderstood a lot in their life, or they frequently misunderstand other people or whatever. They'll be like, is that the question that you asked? Or I'm not sure if I'm answering the right thing. And I just let them know, like, it's always okay if you misunderstand me. I will repeat something if it's really important.
This is so not limited to therapists.
This is so
applicable to like every interaction that you have.
This episode is just entirely life advice. Here's how to like have better conversations. Here's how to get along better with others.
Yeah.
Go with it.
Sure.
There's in improv, like an improv comedy, there's the yes and rule. Mm-hmm. That is my therapy rule.
So you're basically saying therapy and improv comedy are just like the same thing.
They're literally exactly the same thing. There are zero differences between the two.
So you're really trying to go for a real knee slapper sort of situation.
Oh dear God.
Do you remember that in crazy when we lived up in Chicago, that crazy improv troupe that we would go see? And they would like take suggestions for songs and they would do like a whole Broadway musical number.
They would like sing. Oh man, it was incredible.
I was a little drunk because I hadn't encountered like sobriety at that point. And I was like, I yelled like dick cheese. Mm-hmm. And you could see that they didn't want to do that, but I had yelled it loudly enough. And those poor motherfuckers did an entire like Broadway show about dick cheese.
It was amazing.
It was incredible. Best dick cheese musical I've ever seen.
Yeah.
If you're wondering what dick cheese is, just keep it that way. Keep wondering.
Do not Google
dick cheese.
Continue with your life.
Okay. Oh, and if you're also like, man, I love that podcast, but they just swear so much. Go fuck yourself.
Oh, no.
Here's another one that I really liked. I don't understand an event until I understand how they were doing the best they could.
Yep. So when I'm wondering how much I need to like explore about a part of somebody's life that they're talking about, my goal is that I'm understanding how they were doing the best that they could at the time. It's a deeply held belief that I have. People are doing the best that they can with what they have. And so when I'm like exploring an event with somebody, we are always okay to move on when they want to move on.
Okay.
I'm never forcing somebody to talk about that thing longer.
Where's the rebel base? Talk.
Yes, like that.
Where's your childhood trauma? What do they do to you?
Take me to it. So we can move on when somebody's not ready to talk about something or
Right.
whatever. That's always fine. But as I'm exploring, something good to keep in mind is my goal is to figure out how they were doing the best that they could. And probably to reveal that to them, to help them understand how they were doing the best they could. Because when people understand that, that's a major component of healing. That's not always enough to like completely resolve the event. And there are some other tools and strategies that we have in therapy and different models and everything. But in general, if somebody can really believe that they did the best that they could with the things that they had at the time, it's not something that they have to continue carrying around and feeling shame about.
And that's a pretty radical belief shift for a lot of people. A lot of people who are taught in religious contexts that they are inherently wicked and inherently evil, or just in social contexts that they are just bad kids.
Yeah. It was so the opposite of the things that I believed about myself as
or
as
they're
a
just
person.
stupid. A lot of the neurodivergent people.
They
they're
just don't
stupid.
try. They're lazy.
Yeah. Or the LGBTQ folks who were told that like the things that they were, the ways they wanted to express themselves and people they were interested in was wrong.
Not only was it bad, but it was an intentional choice that they made.
Yeah. Why would you be gay? Why would you do that? Yeah, it's a pretty revolutionary concept to hear you were doing the best that you could. Especially when you weren't doing well and you weren't behaving well. There has been a lot of grace I've had to extend myself for periods in my life where I was not kind to other people, where I didn't treat even you the way that you deserve to be treated. And there's that period of like remorse, like, and regret over my own actions. And then there's the period of like extending grace to yourself, like understanding that you were doing the best that you could in that moment. And it's all about learning and growing and moving forward, right?
Something else I always remind clients about that is like the fact that you can have regret about it now is because you've grown and changed.
Sure.
Like the fact that you can look back and go, that's not what I should have done. Now you know something different to do. Now you have a different tool or skill, or at very least perspective, that would allow you to do something differently. So those are the tools and skills and perspective that you get to use moving forward. But we can look back at this person who was doing everything they could to get by.
My buddy Chris used to tell me, he's like, look, if you're going to tell me one more time that you're trying to do better, that you're working on doing better, why don't you just get a fucking tattoo that says like,
I remember that period.
Because like every time we talked, I was like, I'm sorry, man, I'll do better. He's like, just get it fucking tattooed. I'll do better. That's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, let's get matching tattoos.
Yes. As a collective, let's all get matching tattoos.
Yeah. That's never been an unwise decision for anybody.
No. We'll have been doing the best we could.
Yeah. I was doing the best I could. I'll try to do better. That's the tattoo. Short, sweet. Oh my God. Get a tattoo like that on your forehead. Like, I'll do better.
In reference. To be fair, like, I think that then there's the question of, is that an excuse for somebody? Is that to excuse bad behavior? And like, we're responsible for the choices that we make moving forward.
Yeah.
But there's, again, nobody has ever bullied themselves into like doing better. And so getting to look back at that thing and go, I, believed that this worst case scenario was going to happen. And the least that I could do in my life, or like all that I could do, all that I can manage in my life, was at least to have control about the fact that my world was about to explode. At least I could know when that moment was. At least I could be a part of that. Like, that's a really tough thing to come to terms with. But it doesn't mean you weren't doing the best that you could in that moment. You needed some sense of control, as we all do as human beings.
I think about the periods of my life where I am most ashamed of my behavior. And a lot of those times are marked by like compulsive, unbelievable lying. Like, why would you even lie about that, my guy? Like, what were you like? Why would that be something you would lie? And why would you lie to that person about that? Well, at the time I was like flailing and I'm just saying that, like, looking back on it with a kinder lens, and we're back to the lens thing, it does actually start to make a little bit more sense. Like, of course I was lying. Of course I was telling untruths about myself because I was like looking for people to like accept me and love me.
Well, I think about the lies that you were telling when we started dating, and a lot of them had to do with things that you couldn't ask for another way, like being able to ask for comfort and support. A lot of the lies had to do with like needing that, and it was a different way to ask for it. That when you tell that lie, the result was that you would get the thing that you needed.
Yeah.
And down the road, when you confronted the lying, you were at a place where you were able to ask for comfort and support.
Dear podcast audience, we talk a lot about my failings on this podcast, and there are
I'm so sorry.
so many, and we could talk about it for so long, but I want you to understand that I have failed in a different way, because when she says that I addressed the lying, I did do that. I addressed the lying, and I decided to not lie anymore, to my detriment. I will not keep anything private. I have no secrecy, no privacy. It is a direct flip from the lying, and it is just as harmful.
You live a real all or nothing sort of lifestyle.
It's not just as harmful, but it's definitely radical. I went radically in the other direction, but the only difference is now I have a podcast.
Oh no.
We have time for one more. I'm just pulling it from this list. You have a bunch of good stuff here. We have time for one more. I love this. I'm going to read verbatim what you wrote. I'll say this every week, forever and ever. Believe your clients.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I mean so many things. We could have a whole podcast episode about it. But again, I'll say it every week. Believe your clients. Believe the person in front of you. They're the expert in their own life. They're the one who knows their story and knows what happened. And even when somebody tells you something that's not fully true, that's useful information. That's the thing that they feel like they need to say. That's the way that they feel like they can be acceptable. We were talking today, I don't know if we have time to get all the way into it, but about lying and about why people lie, and that there's so much information out there about how to stop your kids from lying. Kids
Don't
early
take that
on.
fucking mouth. I'm sorry.
Well,
That was kind of violent. I'm sorry, y'all.
Okay, let's take that a different way. Everybody lies to some degree.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing that occurs in humans. But the reason that happens is early on when we first start talking about our kids are liars. And I heard that all the time in church. Kids are sinners from the moment they're born. They're, immediately lying, immediately doing all these things. Our job is to figure out the right thing to say for the environment that we're in. Mm-hmm. When we're little, we don't even have the mental capacity to manipulate somebody. That telling a lie is about getting the thing that we need, but there's not the ability to separate, okay, I am myself and Price is the separate person, and I can tell him something to make him believe something. That sort of really mature thinking doesn't even exist for us yet.
Right.
We continue to say the things that we need to say, which is why you can ask a kid a little bit older, what's 2 + 2? And if they go 5, you can go, what's 2 + 2? And they'll give you a different answer because they're looking for the correct answer in the situation they're in, not the true answer. And that continues throughout our life where we're looking to give the correct answer. If you ask a kid, did you hit your sister? The correct answer is no.
Right.
You're in trouble if you say yes. And it's fair to want to avoid being in trouble. And kids are wanting to not lose the connection that they have. And that continues all throughout our life. That I don't want to say the thing that's going to cause you to pull away from me or to judge me or disconnect from me.
So as an engaged, empathetic observer, you get to not catch people in lies. Yeah. But you get to notice, hey, I don't think that they're telling me the truth right now. That's so interesting. Why is that?
Yeah.
And then you get to think on, ruminate on that as an expert, as opposed to motherfucker, you're lying right now. I know you're fucking lying.
Right. Yeah. It also stops me from needing to be a detective in that way when I'm sitting in the room. I loved being an advocate because something we always used to say is like, we don't have to get down to the truth. Like, we can just believe the person in front of us. We know that, like, statistically, the people in front of us are telling us the truth.
This is when you were a sexual assault victim advocate.
Yeah, when I was a sexual assault victim advocate, and it was like, leave the detective work to the detectives.
Yeah.
But I always worried, I was like, when you're a counselor, you are supposed to challenge lies. And it was a skill that we were taught in school, how to like find when your clients are lying, how to help yourself through those tough feelings of a client lying to you, how to confront somebody in a lie, how to like tell them they're lying. No. That is too much. That is too much energy, and it is wasted energy. People are telling you what they think the right answer is. And it's hard to sit in front of somebody you don't know, even when you've signed paperwork that says that they can't talk about what you're talking about,
Right.
and they're not going to judge you. That's the first time you're having an experience like that. Or maybe you've even had past experiences with counselors who have felt like they've judged you. You know, we talked about here, I had a counselor who really made me feel like bullied and judged. And I so wanted to believe her, so wanted that to be a good situation, that I believed her over my own self and my own story.
Yeah.
And just know that, like, you don't have to catch a client in a lie. And the same thing.
You don't get like points.
You don't get points. There's no winning in that. And you've just told them that, like, you're looking out for that. And also, you don't know. A lot of the times I've had counselors, you know, talk to me about, I think a client's lying about X, Y, or Z, and the thing actually does turn out to be true. So just keeping in mind that, like, it's not your job to catch somebody in a lie. And the information that they're giving you is useful information, and we can work through that. And if there's something that doesn't make sense, it's either my job to see how both A and B can be true at the same time, or to work through and help them get to the bottom of those feelings of what really happened.
I'll summarize everything that you've just told us with your two overarching philosophies as a therapist, is that people are doing the best that they can, and everyone has an internal healer.
Yep.
And it's your job to help them see how they're doing the best they can and help them engage with that internal
And the
healer.
way to do that is just to stay curious and be open.
Bi curious, remember?
Bi-curious. Be bi-curious. That's the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, that summarizes everything.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say on any of this?
That's enough for today.
That wry smile says yes. Yes, there is.
You know I could talk about this forever.
But the trampoline doesn't jump on itself.
No, it does not. And I haven't jumped on it today, so somebody's got to do it.
Well, before we sign out, I want to remind everybody that Ashlyn's accepting coaching clients. The roster's filling up. I married your therapist at gmail.com. Hit us up. We can get you started. Really good.
We're interested in the support group. If
Yep.
you're interested, email us. imarriedyourtherapist@gmail.com.
Yep. If you're neurodivergent or think you might be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, hit us up. Where can we find you, Ashlyn?
Oh my gosh. You caught me off guard that you remembered. You can find us at I Married Your Therapist on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Or you can find me specifically at therapywith_Ash on Instagram.
You know, I don't think I've said this before, but if you're listening to the podcast, you are doing the thing we want you to do the most.
Oh, yeah.
All of this is to support this is where we get to
This is what we love.
Yeah.
This is where we really get to say the whole thing that we mean,
Yep.
and not a, minute-long clip of it. This is what's important to us.
Well, Ashlyn, I think that wraps us up.
Okay.
Oh God, you want me to call you Ash? Your new invented name for the podcast is Ash. I keep calling you Ashlyn because we're going off of 14 years of me calling you A, and then it's B, and it's confusing.
You can call me whatever you want.
Oh, just don't call me late for dinner.
That's right.
Ash, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Bryce, thank you for your time.
And we will see you next time on I Married Your Therapist.
I really don't care what you call me or what anybody calls me.
Really? I think Ash is cool. It works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice and easy. I like that.
Yeah.
People my whole life have misheard Ashlyn. I've been Ashley, Alyssa.
Alyssa.
Catherine for some reason.
Ashlyn, Catherine. I can see that.
Yeah, so Ash is fine.
I just will never understand why we didn't name your private practice Kick Ash Counseling.
That was the better name for sure.
Missed opportunity.
Mhm.